Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the BS that you don't realize you are being hypnotized with. And we call it recruitment language. And I'm going to start by apologizing for something. I'm about to share with you something that once you know it, you will not be able to unhear it or not notice it everywhere. And it's a shift in language that can change so much in your life in the best ways. First, let me share with you a little story. You know, when you set a goal and then you start taking action on the goal, but when you do this, you start getting distracted and then things go wrong and then you start to self-sabotage and then you feel bad about yourself and you don't want to do it anymore. And that's just the way we are, right? Now, that's my story. And maybe that's a story about me. Maybe. I'm sure it can be applied to many times of my past. And maybe it's relatable to you too. But regardless, I just used a bunch of stuff that was supposed to be me telling you about my experience, my beliefs, my limitations, but I made it about you. I'm not only hypnotizing you with language, but I recruited you into sharing my limits and my beliefs of the experience I was describing. And humans are doing this all the time. Let's break it down. The first thing I said was, you know how when you set a goal and then you start taking action on the goal, but then you get distracted. I've just said something that is installing and offering you a limiting belief about taking actions towards goals that you might not already have. You might not already have a belief that when you take action, you get distracted. But I've just offered one to you. I've recruited you into that. The next thing I said was, and then things go wrong. I've just indicated and set an expectation in you that when you set goals and take action on goals, things go wrong. Next, I said, and then you self-sabotage, and then you feel bad about yourself and don't want to do it anymore. Yep, I just offered you or reinforced in you that belief as well, that you can self-sabotage and then feel bad about yourself and then not want to do it anymore. And I ended with, and this is just how we are, right? I'm suggesting a broad generalization about how people are and asking for your engagement and agreement, which can more solidify the installments that are being made. Now, when we do this with our words, of course, we aren't meaning to offer and add our limits and bad experience to and on others. I'm also not saying that everything I just said doesn't apply to a lot of people who go after goals. However, there are a lot of people who don't believe these things, who don't subscribe to those beliefs. A lot of people who experience totally different things or choose to see things in a positive or productive light instead of the negative one that I was going into in my story. And yet, when we recruit people into our own personal experience and behavior and choices, we can plant seeds of doubt in others or add to their existing similar beliefs. And in doing so, it builds more of our own beliefs in that thing. because we're getting to talk about the limits and getting others to say yes to it. Responding to that invitation to be recruited into that story or to maybe share their own. So we're hitting on that yummy program our brain loves of being accepted by the tribe as well. And it's the way humans have come to speak and use language that is interesting. And if you like, we're going to start playing with it in a new way for the better outcomes of others, but especially for the outcomes for you. And here's why. It's not the suggestions of the behavior necessarily, but the words you and we that is the thing that gets to be challenged and changed. You know how you insert story, or you know when you do this and you do that, insert story, or this is how we do things, right? Referring to maybe a story you've just told or an experience you've just shared. It sounds funny when we hone in on it like this, and yet witness how you might be doing it in your life. How often others around you are telling a story about themselves, their experiences, their beliefs, but saying the words you and we instead of I. It also happens a lot in sales and marketing too, to recruit you into buy things, baby. Pay attention. As opposed to, I know how I insert the story, or when I do this, or when I do that in relation to a behavior or an experience, or this is how I do it in relation to a story or behavior. And now, again, I'm not saying that what others go through doesn't apply to us as well. Yet, while on a core program, like biological, hormonal, chemical level, humans are very similar to each other in how we move through the world, our learned beliefs and the experiences we've created from our learned beliefs and the filters that we choose to see the world through are so very different. And the conscious programming of our beliefs in the direction of what we want to experience and manifest can be held back when we are both speaking like this in conversations with unconscious recruiters, let's call them, or listening to these kind of stories and taking on more installations of limits that we may have that we're trying to change. And when a person is not consciously being mindful of the content being consumed, the conversations we are in, we run the risk of being hypnotized and programmed into someone else's filter, someone else's limiting or negative experience or beliefs. Yes, you are being hypnotized. We are always being hypnotized. I'm hypnotizing you right now. Yet with something that's hopefully going to be incredibly beneficial for you to apply into your life so you can take back control. You and we are hypnotic prompts for our beautiful human brain. And again, they're also hitting on the inclusion button that we all have. It's one of our primary human needs that makes us feel included in a situation that someone's sharing, or in tribe, or in family. So I'm going to start flipping my own story now so that you can see it in a different way, or how you might do it differently. I might start to ask myself, how and who and what am I choosing to be hypnotized by? Do I believe the things this other person is experiencing are as bad as they are saying? Do I have a different outlook myself, or would I like to have a different outlook? Because I know that it's important to look at things in new ways to get better actions or solutions. So I'm going to tell the story again using I language. And then I'm going to tell it a third time as Kat, as me, would share something like that. And you can start to see the difference. And this is how my clients might ask a question about a challenge they have, for example. So same story, but using different language. I know how when I set a goal and then I start taking action on the goal, I start getting distracted. And then things go wrong and I self-sabotage. And then I feel bad about myself and I don't want to do it anymore. And this is just how I am, right? Perhaps try to say that out loud yourself. I'm going to repeat it again so that you can play with it. I know when I set a goal and then I start taking action. You go. And then I start getting distracted. And then things go wrong. I self-sabotage and feel bad. And then I don't want to do it anymore. And this is just how I am, right? Did anyone else start to feel a little uncomfortable using I language? Actually admitting in the story that you're telling that it's about you. That you might even be alone in this experience of this unwanted thing. And can you feel the limits in the beliefs more in your body? Or witnessing and hearing me telling that story with I language, did you see me in a different light or energy? I'd love for you to drop your thoughts in the comments if that landed. When we drop into using we and you storytelling language, we remove ourselves from the situation a little. We disassociate from the experience that we have actually created in our reality, not allowing ourselves to fully feel the weight of it being our experience or our belief system. And if one isn't feeling the fullness of the unwanted thing, it's more likely we won't do something about it, to change it, to challenge it, to get something better. This also goes on the flip side too. If we aren't using I language when telling great stories and outcomes, we don't allow ourselves to embody them, to realize that we've created them, experienced them, enjoyed them. We don't anchor them as much as we could. And the more we anchor the good moments, the more energy we have from the good moments to carry us through the harder times. You and we language, as mentioned, also pulls on that tribal and connective string in others. It activates attention, maybe pity, advice giving, which is usually not so great. Right? So now I'm going to tell the same experience from a coach's mind, from a mind who knows that any hard time can be transformed into some kind of gold. So I set some crazy new goals recently. And then I started noticing all these distractions coming up as I was taking action, and I got caught up in them here and there, if I'm going to admit. I started noticing when I gave into these distractions, things stopped flowing and weren't working out the way I wanted. First, I looked at these challenges and how I could learn from them specifically. Then I looked at how to challenge what I had created through me getting distracted. So I made a plan to reduce those distractions and do things differently, which was going to reduce the opportunity of me doing that again. I'm still feeling a little annoyed that I have to keep repeating this process, and I know that I'm building programs that will make things easier and easier and easier. Can you see how a story of a challenge has just become, in many ways, a celebration of growth, gaining more control, recognizing achievement, with an invitation for critical feedback or thoughts? Because at the end of sharing stories, if I'm sharing them with a coach or a trusted advice giver, I'm always going to ask if they have any reflections or things that they're noticing where I might be holding myself back, or challenges they'd like to push me on. This third one is me choosing to stand in the belief system I want to emanate, in the solutions and growth mindset that will transform challenges. And it's self-hypnosis to build new programs at the same time as inviting the person I'm speaking to realize how they could also start looking at challenges too. This is why affirmations are really powerful tools, even though they've become somewhat surface level in the loud self-development world now. They are incredible for creating new story to reframe recruitment language, either coming out of us or others, and tell a new story about yourself, to yourself and others. And so, quick story. In 2018, I had been chronically ill for about 5 years straight. I had constant pains in my reproductive area. I had been labeled with IBS and leaky gut and chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. No one checked, but later I would find there was a massive benign tumor growing in my uterus. And I had developed severe anxiety and panic attacks and clinical depression. Bipolar was being mentioned by this point because of my mood fluctuations. And by the time they started talking about checking for endometriosis or PCOS, I'd been locked in a full body spasm from the fibromyalgia for about 6 weeks. And I was on a bunch of medications that were not making any difference to the symptoms I was experiencing, but were making my gut and my moods 100 times worse because the medications were weakening my whole system. And I was at my wit's end. I wanted to leave this world, but nobody really knew it. And every person in my life, at work or anywhere else, knew my sickness story, and always would ask me, how are you feeling today? What's wrong today? I would tell the story over and over and over and over again. I would recruit others who had similar symptoms into my little conversation of pain, and we would commiserate in our shared misery together, until I realized none of us were getting any better. And at the same time, I learned about language and story. And I was also on my knees many nights begging the universe for a sign if I should stay around or not. Because at this point, I had tried all the things that my mother and my doctors could find or suggest, and nothing seemed to be working. I was out of money. I felt out of time. I was definitely out of any energy that I had left. And I decided to do a couple of powerful things on a physical level. I decided to finally get rid of the reproductive pill, the birth control pill, and I spent the only money I had left on a bunch of fruit and vegetable supplements to help my guts to heal and rebalance while coming off the pill. And alongside these two things, I made a commitment to stop telling my sick story 100%. And instead to replace it with a new affirmation and story that was more like the third example that I shared. The one of personal ownership, of self-responsibility, of awareness, of action, and compassion. And when people asked me how I was, I started saying my affirmation. I'm excited. I'm excited because I'm learning how to heal. And I know I will feel better the more and more I do this. I started saying the same thing to every single question about how I was feeling, instead of all the things I would usually say. I'm excited because I'm learning how to heal. And I know I will feel better the more and more I do this. I was off on a 2-week trip or 2-month trip to India to volunteer. And I remember thinking, if this does not work, I'm probably going to die over there. And hey, at least I would have gotten to see India, right? The more I committed to my new protocol, and it was hard, the healthier I became. And any time I wanted to go into telling a story of maybe anything niggly that I was feeling that wasn't great, I would make sure that I was telling it with I language. And because I did this, it would stop me from telling the whole story, because I had to actually feel it and own it, that it was mine, because of that language change. The more I told the story of healing, a lot changed. I lost the only few friends that I had close to me at that point. No longer was I the person that was in all the pain and the problems for maybe them to distract from their own or sit in misery with. It triggered a lot of people. I stuck with it with as much kindness and compassion as I could. If you haven't seen my video on healthy boundaries, this is a strategy that I started really using at this time. I got better and better and better. The pain was gone. The fatigue faded away for the first time in years. Hormones took a while to balance out, but within a year they had. I started finding myself in better community. I started meeting new people where I learned new lessons for the next step and the next. And while it still took a few years to work through a lot of my own limiting beliefs, I now was learning about hypnosis and things like recruitment language, and was able to recognize it and what I might be taking on from others utilizing this language as well, and how I could curate a better environment to be hypnotized with. I also saw the power of saying my story as me, helping to create it and bringing it to life. How I was choosing or chasing the discomfort of this issue that I might have had on some level, because it was familiar and comforting, and I was getting some kind of hit from my external reality, some kind of pity or advice or nurture by telling the story of pain. But the more I told it as me, the more I realized I didn't want to keep feeling it, and I started having more energy to take action to do something about it. It shifted so fast. Story is so important. Language is so important. Words are spells. That's why we call it spelling. So, what spell are you casting on your own life right now through your language? What spell is being cast by the language that you're listening to through the stories from others and the quality of the conversations that you're engaging in? Is it time to start consciously choosing the beliefs and actions that you will now take on to create a better outcome for yourself, like I did? Are you recruiting people into a limited mindset or experience? Or are you unconsciously allowing yourself to be recruited into others? You get to choose, you get to change it, and it gets to become such a tool to curate the life that you really want. And if this landed for you, make sure you give it a share or drop a comment. Let me know what you thought, and subscribe for more juicy stories and all the things that help me turn a life of so many different types of pain into empowerment and purpose and dreams coming true. And if you want to come join the community, we're offline right now having the best time inside the Lovely Radical Academy. You can apply in the links, or you can join in any time. And you can always email support@lovelyradical.net if you need to set up a personalized payment plan. But until next time, choose it, create it, and enjoy it. And if you need help with this, come join us inside LRA.